Hi, I'm Mr. Franklin, and in this video, we're going to take a look at three different options for solving mathematical problems within physics when we get to the solve stage. Before you watch this video, you should be familiar with the R2D2 guess method of solving problems in physics. This is going to be specifically about the equation, substitute, and solve, and some options to help you work through this. So there are more methods than this, but we're going to focus on three. So we have option one, plug and chug. We have option two, which is the triangle method, and option three, which is circle and solve. So all of these options are valid options for solving a problem. The key is no matter which one you use, you must show your steps. Just a note though, before we get into this, most of my videos that I make, I prefer to use option one because especially with more complicated problems, to me, this is the most clear about what is actually happening with the math, what's happening with the physics. So I prefer this one, but we are doing very basic physics. So these other methods will work just as well. If you want help on using those methods, please come visit me during my tutorial time or come and ask me during class, and I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and work through problems with you using your preferred method. So here we have our first option, which I call plug and chug. And you can see here we've got a problem set up where we've already done our guess. So we've got our given, unknown equation, substitute and solve. So our givens were velocity equals 12 meters per second, t equals 4 seconds, and d equals question mark. So distance is my unknown. So I went to my equation sheet in the back of my composition book, and I went and looked for an equation that had these three variables in it. And so I chose this for my equation. Now there's a problem with this is that this equation says V equals. So if I plug in my numbers, I'm not going to get an answer right away. I'm going to have to do some algebra. So that's why the actual next step, substitution. So what I do is we're going to take this V and we should put it in parentheses. Okay, so 12 meters per second. So I put the V, I put parentheses, and then I plug in my number there. Then I write the variable that's unknown, and then I plug in the number for time. So I've got velocity equals distance divided by time. Now that I've substituted, now I'm going to solve by doing algebra. So I'm looking to get this by itself. So that means I need to move the 4 seconds. So how do I move the 4 seconds around? If it's dividing, I have to do the opposite. So I multiplied both sides times the 4 seconds. I multiplied it here and I multiplied it here. And in so doing, 4 divided by 4 equals 1. We say that cancels, but it's 1. Seconds divided by seconds cancel. And we're left with d by itself. So I can write the d. So I can write that. And then seconds divided by seconds cancel, and I'm left with 4 times 12, which is 48. And the m is left, so 48 meters. So I've got 48 meters is my final answer. Notice that distance is measured in meters, so that makes sense. And also, if I went for 4 seconds, I do a double check. Does that number also make sense? And I think it does. Okay, so just keep in mind, as a side note, that we're missing the drawing as well as our reading and all the other annotation stuff. So what this is trying to show you is the preferred method is to choose your equation and then substitute the numbers in and then follow your correct algebra steps to arrive at a final answer. So that's what most people will call plug and chug. So you plug in the numbers and you work through the algebra until you arrive at a final answer. So some of us aren't necessarily that strong at our algebra, and it can get confusing because we're doing it with units and all kinds of stuff. So some people actually prefer, especially as beginners, to start with the triangle method. So let's take a look at the triangle method, same problem. What you can see first is we've got the same problem. We've got our givens and we've got our unknown, and then I've picked the equation. Now, instead of doing algebra with it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and put it into what's called the triangle. And so how do I build the triangle? So first thing I do is I look at the division part. If it's division, it's going to go over the top of the line. So I've got d divided by t. So you can see how I've got d divided by t. and then I put the V over here. And so V equals D divided by T. Now, what's cool about this is I can actually, like, in a sense say, well, what does T equal? If I cover up the T, I could say T equals D divided by V. And if you did the algebra, that's exactly what you would get. Okay. Now, what if I'm looking for D? So D equals, so if they're side by side, it means you're going to multiply those two. So those are side by side. So those are going to multiply. If it's top and bottom, it means you're going to divide. Okay. So D equals velocity times time. V equals distance divided by time. And then T equals distance divided by velocity. So then what I do is I write the base equation that I picked from my equation sheet. I draw my triangle, and then I figure out which one I'm going to do. And so I'm looking for D. So I'm probably going to circle that and go, oh, well, it's got to be velocity times time. And now I'm going to write that here. So that's how I recommend that you do this is you write the base equation from your equation sheet, you write the triangle, circle the unknown, and then that's going to be equal D, what you circled, equals, and then what's left over, velocity times time. And now you just substitute. So now we're going to plug in our numbers, 12 meters per second times 4 seconds, and that's going to be 48. And the seconds divided by seconds cancel or equals 1. And 1 times 48 is 48. And we have our final answer. So this is great, especially if you are struggling with your algebra a little bit, because I do want you to make sure you can solve your problems and think about the physics involved. I do encourage you to use the first method as much as possible. And if you get stuck, then you can jump to this. Don't not use this, but we do want to work on our algebra skills. So please do try the other method first. But if push comes to shove, then you should be using what works for you. The third option is really basically a plug and chug option or the triangle method, but we're actually doing it algebra style without the numbers. So we're going to do algebra, but with just the equation and not the numbers. Now, with this equation, it's actually fairly simple, and some people like this better because it's easier to see what's going on. When we get into much more complicated equations, I get lost doing this. So this is why I don't like doing this, but I've taught enough people how to do it. So I do know how to do it and why you do it. It's just not my preference personally. So here, basically same problem, got our given, we got our unknown, and now we've written our base equation. So kind of like the triangle method, draw a circle around what am I looking for? So what is my unknown? And so now I know I need to manipulate the other variables to find what I'm looking for. So I want D by itself, which means I need to move the T. So I take the T that's dividing right here, and I'm going to multiply both sides times T. So I multiply times T, and I multiply times T. So now I got velocity times time equals distance, which is the same equation we had with the triangle, okay? And so then I plug in my numbers. There is no number for D, but I do have a time and I do have a velocity. So 4 times 12 is 48. Seconds times meters per second, seconds divided by seconds equals 1. 1 times m equals m, so I got 48 times m equals D. 48 meters equals distance. Just be careful that when we get into much more complicated equations, this can be just as confusing as the other one. So I'm primarily going to work from a substitution method strictly and not do these except for once in a while. But you are welcome to do this if that works better for you. Bottom line though is you must show your work. So for this one, got to write the root equation. You've got to show your algebra and show the final equation you arrive at. Even if you've already got this written in your comp book, which you could do, I still need to see those steps because I want you to be thinking algebraically as much as possible, and I want you to show your work. If you're doing the triangle, show your work. If you're doing the plug and chug, show your work. If you do have any questions, please let me know that. Send me an email or visit me during tutorial time, and we can work through our problems in many different ways to come to a solution. That concludes this video on different options for solving your equations for your 7-step problems. Thank you and have a good day.